Hello, in this video I want to go a little bit more into the Parthenon, but I want to do, I think it's very important first to do a focus on the Salamis Stone. And so the key to these temples is, for one thing, proportion. So it doesn't matter whether you're using uh, jelly beans or TV remote controls as your basic unit of measure. The proportions in all these temples mark them out as very special. However, the use of measurement and the numbers connected with those and how they connect, especially through the quadrivium, and really delivering us to some very important astronomical, geometric, musical, and arithmetic knowledge in there. And it's this consistent element. But so the Parthenon, 48, so the columns, including the architrave and that section there on top, 48 feet high. 48 of our modern English foot, as they call them, but as we'll see, they are much, much older than what most history will give credit to. But also, it's very important in the way it connects to other measures. But so here we see, here's the Salamis Stone, and there we go. Okay, so the Salamis Stone is a etching, and there we see the stone itself. And it's very important because it's a conversion point between multiple units of measure: the common foot, the modern foot, the Doric, and the Ionic. And that in itself will push us to some very important information in regards to harmonics and so forth. Well, here's just a rough chart, but like you can see, so common, Doric, Ionic, and Samian, and I'll explain that in a moment. But we can see, so the so 48 common feet, as we marked out as a Parthenon, is 45 Doric or 50 Ionic. So we get a basic conversion. We'll explain this one later, but already, so 16 to 15, so 16 common is 15 Doric. Or well, again, I'll explain later, but 15 Doric is 16 Ionic, 9 Doric equals 10 Ionic, or 24 common is 25. Now, these ratios are very important, and we'll get to those in a moment because they connect to so many other units. Now, before I go on, just a moment. Okay, so we'll get to that, come back to that later. But so, okay, that's the Salamis Stone, the basic outline of it. And so this section here, now that part is missing, and we'll get to that as well later. But we have, because of the height of the stone, we have a very good idea of what the length is. But we do have the height of the stone, and we do have these other markings, so we can be more than confident with that. And so what this is almost like on the back of your school notebook. You might remember the conversion charts. Well, this is what it's doing, and it's converting. So Attic, but now we're going to call that Ionic because even Marc Wilson-Jones refers to that in Ionic as other in other references. But so this yellow foot is, so from the tip of the heel to the toe is one English foot, as we call it, like one modern foot. This bar here is one Doric foot, and from the bar to the bottom is exactly one Ionic foot. And again, we'll explain more. So here's the stone as it exists. It's now in the museum, but again, Marc Wilson-Jones, University of Bath. So he was the one he's the one who studied this and found this and applied it to it. But I want to go a little bit further with this, but all credit to Marc Wilson-Jones to begin with. And so first we begin with the Doric foot. Now here we have, well, the Doric is an order of architecture. Now I'm going to first begin with columns, but columns is not the only defining thing in regards to the Doric order. So for instance, this illustration here. Okay, so we have a Doric column, and we also have these, well, these three bars with these like little bell type things hanging underneath. That's called a triglyph. And so the Doric column with the triglyph here on the architrave is like a standard feature, so we can see a triglyph. But so if we begin anyway, so we have the Doric column here. We have three versions of it, and so 600 BC in Paestum, which is in Italy, a Greek colony, some of the oldest temples, we see the earliest Doric columns. Now, you might notice, firstly, the curvature of them is important. The proportion of the the capital there, and they're relatively fat compared to the height. So this is the early Doric columns. So they're shorter and broader in ratio. Now, if we move to, say, this Doric column, this is directly from the Parthenon, we see, so the evolution in, roughly 150 years from the earliest Doric to the what would be called the classical Doric column. And this type of Doric was what the Roman architect Vitruvius and then in the 1500s people like Palladio of proportions of what we would now call a true Doric column. Okay, this is an example of a Doric column here from Sydney. But anyway, just to show the sort of evolution, slightly different forms, but basically it's the straight plain column. And what it does, again, according to Vitruvius, so this goes way back before Freemasons, and one of the things I sort of get is this that is somehow devil. Well, this predates. These masons who were building these temples goes back quite some time, and even the writings of it. So it goes back to Vitruvius, and even earlier, because he didn't invent the term. He was just writing about what Greek writers and architects had been talking about for some time. So the Doric represents the male. It's also called the column of strength. And there are many other features, but to begin with, so if you have the Doric foot, that's 1.06666 feet. And in simple terms, a ratio of 48 feet equals 45 Doric, which we can simplify to 16 over 15. This is a very important ratio, 16 to 15. Another feature, and we'll get back to 16 to 15, but just another feature with the Doric, as also called the Dorian music mode. And again, history will only give that, around the 1400s, 1500s, will the official history recognize it. But because of the way that the ancient measures correspond to Dorian music scales, as well as these others, it will strongly suggest that this musical scales are much older, because otherwise in the 1400s, 1500s, that they had knowledge of the Doric and the Ionic and the Samian foot and all these other feet, which is just as an important reference. Now, I personally believe that they did, and the amount of, well, okay, that's a whole other point, but whether they knew about it or not, or whether it was invented or not, is not really important. The importance is that at least from the 1500s, they were applying this. Again, there's a lot more information we'll go through. Okay, and so the Doric or Dorians, as they so the Dorian people who live, who are of the Doric regions, there we can see their footprint. Now, there's something called the Dorian invasion. It's a controversial part of history. So before the classical Greek period, we had the Dorian invasion, according to some history. And they were the descendants of Hercules, and they had been sent into, like according to legend, they'd been sent into some sort of exile, and then they returned. Some say they returned in the direction from the arrows, but others say they also come from the north. Again, that's a whole other point. I'm not just pointing that out because it's just a connection. Not that I have any information in regards to that. But okay, so the Parthenon, we have your classical Doric column, and we also have the triglyph. So the Parthenon Doric columns, the triglyph, it's very under the classical Doric order. However, so Doric order architecture, it's not just about the columns, it's about all these other little features within the temple. However, for instance, friezes like Elgin marbles, and you'll even see, like, there's not much left, but there's like little statues. Well, they belong to the Ionic order of architecture. So what you have in the Parthenon is a fusion of the two. So it's not Doric. Well, it is Doric, but it contains Ionic elements. So it's a bit of a mixture. Now that's relevant because we get to the next one, which is the Ionic foot. So the Salamis Stone, we have this foot here, a footprint, common foot. We have the Doric foot, and we also have the Ionic. And there's more to it. We'll get to that, but just to begin with those. And so the Ionic just like the Doric order of architecture, we also have the Ionic order of architecture. We also have them represented as in their own measure, because what we call Greece was not one homogeneous big country. It was, a whole bunch of city-states that existed under the general banner of Greekiness, rather than, being, because the Spartans were different to the Dorians, who were different to the Athenians, and they all had their own little unique features and their own measurements, which is an important point. So the Ionic column. So okay, the Naxian Sphinx. This is one of the earliest examples of the Doric order, and the Sphinx on top, and this Greek Etruscan type Sphinx. Then in the Parthenon, such as in the Erecthian, which again, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but we have the Doric came first, and then we have the emergence of the Ionic order, and here's a sample of Ionic columns, still like in Sydney, but here on the left, two ancient examples of it, Ionic columns. Temple of Athena Nike in Athens, there we see. So not only do you have the the Ionic columns, the ones with the swirls, we also have the friezes. So this, is fulfilling the major elements of what would be called the Ionic order of architecture. And so the Ionic, and just as the Doric represented the male, the Ionic represents the female, the mature female, as opposed from the maiden or the virgin, which is represented by the Corinthian column. It's also known as the column of wisdom. So as whether Doric is the male or the column of strength, the Ionic is the female of a column of wisdom. Now these little swirls at the top, now they're meant to represent the swirls of a woman's hair, being very simple. As so a mature woman would have a more simple hairstyle, and her beauty would be through simplicity, as opposed to the maiden or the virgin, who would have a much more elaborate hairstyle. And that's reflected also in the style, because the Corinthian is a very elaborate column, as opposed to the very simple Doric and relatively simple Ionic column. So one Ionic foot equals 0.96 feet. Now even the conversions are all harmonics, but we won't go into that. There's a lot in regards to that, which gives us a simple ratio of 24/25, which again reflects back through that 16:15 ratio. I'll come back to that. So just like the Dorian, the Ionian or the Ionic is a musical mode, and there we see Ionic, the Ionian region. Okay, and now, so the common foot, Doric and Ionic, you see this 24/25, 16:15 ratio. This will come because, again, as we get more into it, so the common foot, again, is represented with this yellow bar, where there's an actual foot marked into the stone, and we also see this ratio 48/45/50 for Ionic and Doric, but from common to Doric is 15/16, and from Doric to Samian is 16/15. And while I'm here, I might as well point that out now. Some other examples of 16/15 is 16 Roman feet to 15 Mycenaean, as Strachini pointed out, which will also reflect back into this system. But also Babylonian cubits equals 16 Babylonian cubits equals 15 Royal Babylonian cubits, and up here you can see diatonic semitones, ratio of 16/15, as well as 25/24, which was the same ones mentioned earlier. But back to okay, I'm going to pause for a moment. Okay, so the Salamis Stone, we have the Doric foot, the Ionic foot, and the allegedly modern foot going back to at least roughly 500 BC, so 2,500 years ago. But that's not all. So we have the Doric, Ionic, the common, but we'll also have the Samian foot. But so okay, you stand a 12-inch ruler that you're used to. So this so the Doric, the Salamis Stone forms a function of being a conversion tool, which is pretty much the same feature of what the Great Pyramid, the Ark of Utnapishtim from the Epic of Gilgamesh, New Jerusalem, And well, so many of these temples, including Sanchi and some other, well, all these that's one of the key features of this, is that they use multiple sets of measure at harmonic points to deliver us some very important proportions, but more importantly, numbers in which directly connect back to sun, earth, moon, so astronomy, geometry, music, and arithmetic. So what we have is, well, the modern English foot is, appearing in ancient Greece. We also have a conversion point, 48 feet equals 45 Doric or 50 Ionic, which gives us these 16 to 15, 24 to 25 ratios. And so, well, okay, so, your standard, it's there, it's quite old, and it's not just some random measurement. It's actually very ingenious way of encoding knowledge. But there are many other features. So, for instance, the Doric foot, we also have what would be a Doric cubit, so 1.5 Doric cubit. So first we can have a look at the height of the stone. And there we have the height. And what that does is it converts to, well, 2.56 feet, 256, as well as some, well, other important numbers. But most importantly for the moment is it's exactly 96 Ionic grains or 81 Samian. So what we have is a conversion point there, and so that's the height of the stone. And then we have and again, harmonic numbers. These are the same sets of numbers that appear in all these temples in Parthenon, Great Pyramid, Sanchi, Stonehenge, going on through to all Washington, Canberra, Brasilia, Astana, Paris, London, all across time, cross cultures, all a coincidence, of course. And so at 2.56 feet, we have a conversion rate between Ionic and Samian. And also, but this blue section is missing. Now, there's some very good reasons that we can assume, and it is working on an assumption that including the missing portion, the whole length should be 3.84 feet, or exactly 4 Ionic, which again gives us conversion 64 Ionic fingers or 54 Samian fingers. So again, now we have, whether it's the height, which we can be quite certain is a conversion Ionic and Samian, and therefore also the width if we were to complete this through to the axis of symmetry, because there's a man there and like running down his, directly down the center line. If we extend that out, we get exactly that measurement. And so again, so 4 Ionic. So what essentially we have is that the edge length, whether it's the width or the height, is Ionic and Samian. However, if we go a little bit further, and okay, before we get there, firstly, so what this is a 2 to 3 ratio, which gives us the vesica Pisces, the essential, the fundamental unit in what's been called sacred geometry. If it was up to me, I'd give it a different name, because that, attaching, but anyway, the Salamis Stone, draw a vesica. Now, this same pattern is built into the street plans of, for instance, here in Sydney and so many other places, but there's a lot of information in there. So this 3 to 2, again, you might think it's simple, but it's not. It's and how it will blend and connect to other aspects of it. So to begin with, 2 to 3 is the perfect fifth, and music is very important in this. Now we also have the tetractys, the tetragrammaton, again how this applies to the perfect fifth. But also, so the Parthenon itself, it's 9 to 4 ratios are built in there, and 9 to 4 is simply 3 squared, 4 squared. So it's, that's in there. But more than that, and so Anne Balkans, and featured her in a previous episode, well, she just points out the fact that throughout the Parthenon, the 2 to 3 ratio and these other musical ratios are built into the tire throughout the structure. So it's not just by accident that the columns were 48 feet high, and it's not, this is all part of to call it coincidence is crazy. It's crazy, it's the tinfoil hat to believe that this is coincidence, because it's repeated, and we'll go through early episodes. I touched on Sanchi, we'll go through that in the future. But just using this as a basis. Now, if we go to sort of modern tuning scales, now I'd mentioned that the height of it was 256 feet, well 2.56. But again, we'll come back to this. But just as an example of this 2 to 3, 3 to 2 ratio, you see how the musical tuning up based on that 4-3-2 scale is at 3 to 2, 2 to 3. So it's really important. Still, you know, if you're into, if you don't have to be into weights and measures, it's musical as well. Now that vesica, that 2 to 3 ratio, also brings us to another key feature in regards to the Parthenon. Again, Anne Bulkin's analysis on it. The use of 3, 4, 5 triangles, as well as the 5, 12, 13, the Pythagorean triplets. But what we have is 4 interlocking 3, 4, 5 triangles. So we have Pythagorean theorem connected to this, the vesica, and so much else, and we'll see in more and more. Now, I mentioned, so the edge length, whether it's the height or the width, is an ionic Samian conversion point. Well, what's the perimeter of the stone? Well, it's a Doric, Ionic, and Samian conversion scale. So it's and you'll notice, so 432 Doric grains is the perimeter, 480 Ionic grains, or 405 Samian. Now, even, well, 144, 48, 192, 36, these are all built into all the bloody temples, the modern ones, going back through ancient time, consistently across time, across cultures, all the coincidence go away. Now, again, back to the 16 to 15 ratio. So, as an example, we see the perimeter of the stone is 16 Doric span or 15 Ionic span. And this, I mentioned it earlier, it's just one of these really important things. Now, René Descartes, famous philosopher, I think therefore I am, I think therefore I exist. And, well, he, more than that type of philosophy, he also wrote the Compendium on Music. And, for instance, one of his charts here, you know, you might, okay, 288, 540, 486, 480, 432, 405, 384. Okay, yeah, well, what do we have? Well, to begin with, we have this conversion rate here. Doric, Ionic, and Samian. Now, you also notice that these will also bring us to the modern musical scales, or as we say, okay, 192, double reference to 432. For height of a stone, 256. Okay, so we saw these numbers. Now even at 2.56 feet, really you have the whole thing there, and it's back to this 2 to 3 musical scale. And what's more is weight. So we had measures, we had music, and also weights. Now, for instance, the ancient Greco-Roman scale, 432 grains. The troy ounce, 480 grains. Troy ounce is how we measure precious metals. So when you see the gold price quoted, that's where it's coming from. So the Salamis Stone, it's loaded, it's a conversion tool, and Doric, Ionic, common feet, as well as the Samian, and that in itself will deliver us to a whole other set of knowledge. Now, Vitruvian, well, remember, Roman architect Vitruvius, Marco Vitruvius, who wrote about, so the Greco-Roman architecture, his writing, the writings of it really come down through Vitruvius. We have Vitruvius Man by Da Vinci, which is at the phi ratio as well. Now, as was pointed out, now if we overlay the stone and we use that, so we have this blue section, which is the missing piece, but see how we can find the axis of symmetry there. Well, the stone fits, so Vitruvius wrote about Doric and Ionic. That's where we got the information. Leonardo named this after Vitruvian Man. But you might even notice, so this foot here on the stone is what marks the common foot, but it also seems to mark this circle out there, which I just think is an interesting point. Not necessarily 100%, but something to consider. And yeah, so there we see just an example. So if you had the Vitruvian, if we double up the stone down the center of axis, it's even measure, sort of the shoulder and the belly button, the umbilicus. It comes in together and matches quite nice, and even the way the thumbs sort of touch there, and other aspects of it. Even the Doric, basically runs across the nipple there. But okay, and coming back to the beginning. But so that's an intro to the Salamis Stone, and this information that comes from it is really, really important. And again, I'm just as an intro, we'll come back to it more, because if I go to the Parthenon. Okay, so we have here we had 24-25 ratio, 16-9 ratio, and we'll be able to see that better in a second. So 15-16, 9-10, and 24-25. That's between the common English foot, as we call it, Doric, Ionic, and Samian. Now I'd like to bring up a screenshot from a Randall Carlson presentation where he shows the work of Strachini. Which one are we? Okay, so talking about, well, there's a lot of information. There's Cosmic Patterns and Cycles of Catastrophe, Blu-ray, 6 out of 8, presented by Randall Carlson. If you want to check it out, it's an excellent series. But what it, Strachini, he shows the values for the Mycenaean, Roman, and Greek foot. Now that's especially the Greek foot's a little bit confusing, I think. But for the Greek, let's call that the Parthenon foot for the moment. But what you have is Mycenaean to Roman, 16-15, Roman to Greek, 24-25, and Mycenaean to Greek, 10-9, 15-16, 9-10, 24-25. They are the exact same ratios, 9-10, 24-25, 16-15, 15-16, which correspond to the the Doric, the Ionic, and the Samian foot. All of coincidence, nothing to see across time and culture's got nothing to do here because the official establishment has, closed the books on this. But anyway, I'm opening them again because measure, you can measure it. This is, unlike the extrapolation made from a fragment of a part of a hieroglyph. Therefore, the Sphinx was by Caffrey. Well, but yet this is, in terms of evidence, this is magnitudes more important and relevant, and this is data. This is not an opinion, and this is why this stuff needs to be taken in consideration, because not only does it affect the ancient world, it also affects the modern world, because these units, these proportions, are still being used today. Now, whether it's passed on through some secret brotherhood or whether it is in our DNA and we just get direct, I don't know, but it's clearly there, and it's there, it's written in stone, it's written in measure, it can be tested, it can be measured again, and it just is continually repeated, and there's information to be passed on here. So with that, hope you enjoyed, and have a good one. There's a lot more to be coming from this. This video will only be on VidMe, and from now on I'll be doing either from VidMe or from some other non-YouTube Google site, because what we have is a monopoly, and Google and the authorities have taken it on to bring in AI censorship, and I haven't been affected directly or openly, but in solidarity with the other people who do good works and who are being suppressed, the Google and YouTube is now a utility. It's not they're not just selling toys. They're selling something. It's essential to the business of modern life, and the monopoly needs to be broken up with maximum speed. And so anyway, hope you enjoyed. More to come on this series. It will only be on VidMe from now on, and cheerio.